courts as well. While the government has indicated that there may be some relaxation, both in the deadline for the linkage and the documents that are needed for verification of customers, the entire debate does tie into the issue of Aadhaar and why should it be compulsory. Mobile companies, meanwhile, continue to send their customers messages saying, link your Aadhaar number or else. In fact, recently, West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee said she would not link her mobile number with Aadhaar, even if it meant her connection would be cancelled. But why the resistance? What is the fear? And is it a valid one? To talk about this, I'm joined today by Pranesh Prakash. He's Policy Director, Center for Internet and Society. Thank you so much, Pranesh, for speaking with Bloomberg Quint. You know, first up, the government says that they are doing this on the basis of a court order. That because of the need to verify people's phone connections for security purposes, etc. And they talk about a February 6th order where within a year, mobile companies had to verify all their customers, and hence this linkage with Aadhaar. It seems like a fair demand in the face of it.
So I'm not so sure it's a fair demand. An NGO whose antecedents I don't know about had approached the court, and they did not present any proof that the existing KYC documents that everyone needs to provide and has needed to provide for more than a decade now in India while obtaining a SIM card, that those are insufficient for identifying people or for national security purposes. And let us remember that national security is still maintained by countries in Europe, in the US, etc. And none of those require you to identify yourself before purchasing a SIM card. You can just buy in many countries in Europe, you can just buy SIM cards from vending machines. So I'm not so sure about that argument. Secondly, the court never required the government to use Aadhaar, which is what the government has said, that their hands are tied, that the court has ordered us to do so. Actually, it was the government that before the court said, in order to improve security, we can use Aadhaar and we will do so within a year. And the court just said, we hope that that happens within a year. It has never ordered that Aadhaar be used. I think these two things ought to be clear about the court order.
You know, let me come to the basic question. The fact is, despite all of the litigation, and from a layperson's point of view, Aadhaar is a part of everyone's life. You pretty much can do nothing without an Aadhaar card, or will find it very difficult to do anything without an Aadhaar card. So then why the resistance to link it to your mobile number? What is the fear?
There are multiple concerns, but let me say what concerns are not valid. Just today, the West Bengal Prime Minister was quoted as saying that linkage to Aadhaar will enable conversations between a husband and a wife to go straight to the BJP office, or words to that regard.
You're quoting
and
Mamata
that
Banerjee.
is an unfounded. Yes, and that is actually an unfounded fear. Linkage to Aadhaar will do nothing to either increase the powers or increase the abuse of phone tapping laws in India. There's a dire need. Let me not mince words. There's a dire need to improve our surveillance systems. Currently, the laws are just too lackadaisical. They are pro-surveillance and not pro-liberty. And so there is an urgent need to improve the law, and there's very little that has been done towards that end. But linkage to Aadhaar does not automatically enable UIDAI or any other authority to listen into your phone calls. And so that concern is not a valid concern. There are other concerns which I believe are more valid. For instance, Aadhaar is meant to be something that makes things easier for you and was always meant to be voluntary. For instance, an argument made in favor of Aadhaar for KYC is that if you use Aadhaar Reliance Jio, for instance, allowed for use of Aadhaar for eKYC. If you do that, you can get your connection within within half an hour, say. Whereas if you use traditional documents for KYC, it would take you a day or 2 days in order to get that card. But people, if that convenience existed, people would voluntarily choose to get that convenience. You wouldn't need to force people mandatorily to get Aadhaar linked to their SIM cards. So what I believe many people are concerned about is making this linkage mandatory rather than voluntary.
Pranesh, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. You anyway have to compulsorily provide some paperwork while getting a SIM card. You have KYC norms in any case. Does this seem like a problem with Aadhaar, which has been the same problem with linking Aadhaar to PAN, with linking Aadhaar to pretty much everything? And the fact is, right now, you need an Aadhaar to get a birth certificate, to get a death certificate, to buy stocks, effectively to get school admissions. You cannot function without it. So if you anyway have to give paperwork, why the problem with Aadhaar?
That's a big question. I don't have an Aadhaar number yet, so if I had to get this kind of linkage, I obviously and others like me would have to get an Aadhaar number. The problem is that this creates a single point of failure in a resilient system, and governance is one such thing where you don't want single points of failure. If for some reason my Aadhaar number gets mixed up with someone else's, and this has happened, there are cases that have been reported where this has happened, then suddenly I get cut off from everything. You don't want that to happen. You want multiple systems that can function independently of each other rather than putting all your eggs in one Aadhaar basket. So that's one potential argument against the linkage of Aadhaar as well. And there's the concern that Aadhaar enables greater linkages between databases. So if you use, for instance, multiple phone numbers, and give your two different phone numbers at two different hospitals, or one number to your insurance company and one number to the hospital, they won't necessarily know that you're the same person. But if you're giving Aadhaar, because Aadhaar is meant to be unique to a person, these two entities who you don't necessarily want to speak to each other can combine their databases in the absence of a data protection law. And in India, let me remind the viewers that we don't have an effective data protection law. And so there is no bar in either under the Aadhaar Act or under any other existing law in India for multiple entities that hold data about you that you might have provided or that they have gleaned about you, from being able to sell that data to others, from being able to combine that data, all without your consent. So that's a problem.
Okay, so the problem is that your mobile company can talk to your bank, which anyway it is doing if you're using mobile banking. Your entire network is anyway connected. Is it really, I mean, I'm just looking at the validity of that argument, and again, playing devil's advocate here, Pranesh, because is it really that impossible for different service providers to figure out who you are today? And is it really such a bad thing if they manage to? Unless they're commercially exploiting your data in a way which could harm you. And there has really been no clear argument to prove that. There's no example per se about how someone has misused someone's Aadhaar number to their detriment.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many examples of people's identities being forged. There are more than 80 lakh Aadhaar numbers were erased by UIDAI because they were thought to be forgeries or duplicates or for various reasons. So let's not think that the system works flawlessly. As the government has admitted, it doesn't necessarily work flawlessly. But be that as it may, I completely accept your point, and I agree that Aadhaar isn't necessarily the only way to identify someone. Phone numbers, in many of our cases, are just just as well identify people as well, and names too. So combining of databases can be done without your consent for profit and for your harm, even without your consent, to an accuracy of say around 70 to 80%. With the Aadhaar, the difference is that that accuracy level shoots up significantly to closer to, as the UIDA, I might say, closer to more than 99% accuracy. So that's the concern. If you're trying to not lead a life that is scrutinized by every department of the government, by every private actor, if you want to shield yourself, if you want a sphere of privacy, then if Aadhaar linkage happens, you can't do anything about it. Whereas without Aadhaar linkage, you can reveal different aspects of your life. You can use one set of phone numbers for one set of transactions with the government. Say with private parties, you can use something else. You can actually do things like this, and I actually do. I use different email addresses, for instance, for different kinds of transactions. I have two different phone numbers, and I use them differently. With linkage from Aadhaar, one doesn't have this ability. So there is a clear concern there, at least for those of us who want to be able to negotiate the space with the state.
And that tribe of people who are fighting for privacy, maybe a small number, but they're very vocal. That's why I will end this, Pranesh, by asking you, how is it day-to-day living without an Aadhaar card? I'm just curious, because the kind of services you need Aadhaar for are wide-ranging. Some may be government mandated, some may be just private companies asking for that information. Does it work all the time, or do you face hurdles?
I think it speaks to my privilege as a middle-class person who doesn't avail of multiple subsidies from the government, that I have been able to get by without an Aadhaar so far. But if linkage to your bank account becomes mandatory, as it soon seems to, if investing for that rather than PAN number, Aadhaar also becomes mandatory, it makes me question what the need for all these other identities are in the first place, and why one says that Aadhaar can be used as a base and these can be identities built on top of that. But actually, it seems to me as though Aadhaar becomes the one identity covering everything. We don't need PAN cards anymore if Aadhaar makes it redundant. And I've been able to live life normally, but who knows how things will be after December, when many of these deadlines come upon me, and I might be forced to get another number myself.
Yeah, definitely when you file your next tax returns, for sure. And we'll see in 2018, there has been some space given by the government so far. But Pranesh, Prakash, one of those who are still fighting that fight and not getting his Aadhaar number. The debate, of course, continues about whether linking your mobile phone to Aadhaar should be mandatory or not. It's in the courts right now, and of course ties up into the big question that should Aadhaar be forced on you for everything? The counter to that is, well, why not? We'll take a very small break on Primetime Debate, but stay tuned, because our next debate is on the Trump government making it tougher to renew your H-1B visas. Apart from all the bonhomie between the United States of America and India, will it really hurt Indians living in America, and especially those working within the IT sector? We're going to speak about that with Nasscomm after this very short break. Don't go away. India's troubles with H-1B visas continue. The U.S. administration has made it more difficult for the renewal of non-immigrant visas such as H-1B and L-1, popular among Indian IT professionals especially. This is in line with Donald Trump's vision of putting America first in his policies and giving, a heads up to American workers. So just how big a dampener would this be for Indian IT companies? To discuss that, I'm joined by Shivendra Singh. He's Vice President Global Trade of IT body in Nasscomm. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for speaking with Bloomberg Quint. Now, on the day Rex Tillerson was here, Sushma Swaraj, External Affairs Minister, put out a statement as well saying that she has impressed upon the Americans that they should not make it difficult for Indians in the United States. But it sure seems to be heading in that direction, isn't it?
Thank the government of India and whether it's the Commerce Ministry, whether it's the Foreign Ministry, and including the Prime Minister for raising these issues at various forums with their counterparts. I think, as a policy, the specific one is something which is rather a continuation of measures which have been taken up by the President Trump's administration of increasing curbs and tightening the process of securing high-skilled visas, something which is very critical in making U.S. clients more competitive and the economy more productive. Now, if I look at it as far as this specific move is concerned, it's primarily on extensions and the kind of onus of proof kind of shifting from adjudicators to the petitioners. Principally, it doesn't look too much as an area which is of huge concern. But if you look at it in overall context, this whole process started right from March, and April when you had the Buy American, Hire American bill, and then it continues on till October, where we are seeing that there is increased RFEs or requests for evidence. We are seeing more and more documentations. We are seeing more and more adjudications, client inspections, very much within the process of law. And we do, and our companies do follow the process of law. But having said that, we don't want it to sound like a harassment in any way or form. If you look at some of the measures in terms of an executive order in June, they also waived off something which was that 80% of the petitions should be cleared within a span of 3 weeks. So that was struck off on security and other concerns, which is okay. But point is, any delay which happens tends to impact the client and tends to impact the U.S. economy. So our request has been on an ongoing basis that this needs to be speeded up, work needs not be hampered, challenges should be addressed so that business continues as usual, and we are able to look at a bilateral trade of about 115 billion US dollars going up to 500 billion US dollars, and technology sector playing a key role in that.
Mr. Singh, if you could explain to us how these new regulations would really impact Indian professionals, specifically in the IT space in the United States. What does it now mean? Because up until now, if you had a valid H-1B visa during renewal, the onus in proving that you're not eligible for it was on the government. Now that onus is on you. So in real terms, what does that really mean for those applying?
Well, there is something called prior determination of eligibility. Now, when we look at it, till 2004, which is the memorandum which has now been superseded, the directions to the adjudicators were as far as deferring to the prior determination of eligibility while evaluating petitions for extension of this non-immigrant visas. Now that has been removed, which means that the onus of proof is on petitioners rather than on the adjudicators. In real sense, obviously the policy does not amount to any material change to the agency's current practice. It reiterates that adjudicators may review all of the supporting documentation when considering a petition for extension. But what we see is that it may lead to delays and if it increases the delays, and most importantly, if you look at the overall tenor of trying to tighten and putting curbs, including, as I mentioned, RFEs and some of the other documentation, then in totality, it has a pretty strong deterrent effect on this whole thing, which is of concern to us.
In terms of the Indian IT industry, what is the impact that you see? Are there any numbers that you could share with us of perhaps how many employees could be impacted this year alone?
No, I wouldn't, kind of look at specific numbers in terms of an impact, but I would definitely look at it from the perspective of looking at extensions and saying when the visa extension is applied for, if there are delays, then it definitely impacts, the performance vis-a-vis the client. Hence, it needs to be seen from that perspective. Our request through the government of India and to the US administration is to try and create a conducive atmosphere where, any of these bottlenecks are cleared. And at the end of the day, as you know, the H-1B or the Ls typically fulfill a very important gap which they bridge in terms of lack of availability of STEM skills, which is a fact in the USA based on number of researchers. So we want to be hiring locally, but this gap which exists is bridged by this critical component. And any challenge which comes to that in terms of delays or some of these tends to hamper the business. For us, we want to focus within the due process of law, but our request is that any of these challenges need to be seen and tackled accordingly.
In terms of how Indian IT companies have been dealing with a changed regime and progressive tightening of norms for H-1B visas, do you think the strategy has changed over, say, the last one odd year?
Strategy from whose side? From our side?
Yeah, for the Indian IT companies.
Well, where the Indian IT companies, the whole model continues to evolve, as you know. It was near shore, onshore, offshore, and now we're talking about no shore. We also see that the entire digital transformation piece is getting, majorly applied. So whether it's big data, whether it's cloud, whether it's robotics, whether it's artificial intelligence. So that keeps on changing and evolving the model. If you look at even H-1B numbers, in 2014, those numbers were about 15,000 odd for the top companies which account for more than 90% of the H-1B visas. That's come down to under 10,000 in 2016. So overall, you see there is a declining trend. There is an increasing trend of hiring locally. There is so these are a lot of trends which are happening over a period of time. So it is all based on the kind of evolution of the industry as digital transformation kicks in as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Shivendra Singh, for speaking with us. Nasscomm there saying that they hope these rules will not have too much of an impact. The biggest impact they see is in delays of renewal of these visas. Now, he leads one of the world's largest tech companies, but all Satya Nadella wanted to do at one point was play cricket. It was, in fact, his father who pushed him to take up engineering, and the rest, as they say, is history. Speaking to Carlyle Group co-founder David Rubenstein on the Rubenstein Show, Nadella also spoke about the advice he got from Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates.
The best advice I got from both Bill and Steve, I think helped me a lot, because their clear message was, don't try to be like us. Don't even bother to sort of say, oh, I'm succeeding these people. Just be your own. In fact, I remember very distinctly, even during the interview process, this is for the board was conducting, they asked me, hey, do you want to be the CEO? And I said, only if you want me to be the CEO. And the feedback I got was, well, but people who want to be CEOs are like, I want to be CEO. I said, look, that's not me. And I remember going and talking to Steve, and he says, yeah, just be yourself. It's too late to change.
Since you've been the CEO, 3.5 years, the stock is up about, I guess it's about 120%. When you go to your annual shareholder meetings, you get a standing ovation for what you've done?
No, I get a lot of people asking me, hey, look, come home and fix my computer.
Okay. You are a native of India. What part of India?
I was born in Hyderabad, which is in the central part of India.
And so growing up, your parents doted on you, I assume?
Yeah, they did.
And they told you you were going to be prime minister or something important in the country. What did they want you to be?
They just wanted me to stop playing cricket and take my studies a little more seriously.
Now, you were an avid cricket player. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. I was in love with it, yeah.
And when did you realize you weren't going to be a professional cricket player?
Pretty soon. Quickly, I realized that at best, I would play, what is considered perhaps first-class cricket in India, but I was not going to go much further than that. But then that's when my dad, in fact, I remember one of the big decisions that changed my life was, my entire outlook was so provincial when I look back at it, which is, hey, I want to stay in Hyderabad, maybe study economics and political science and work for a bank. That was about the extent of my ambition. And he looks at me and he says, what are you doing? You got to get out of this place. And so he pushed me out to get to an engineering school, and that pretty much, of course, defined the trajectory afterwards.
Your father was a member of the senior civil service, which is an important position, I guess, in India. Is that right?
Yeah, my dad was a very different guy than me in terms of, let me say, his academic prowess. So it is always humorous, which you look at my report cards and he says, oh, I don't understand how anybody can have these kind of marks. But the nice thing about it was he would say it in such endearing ways that it never made me feel bad.
You mean the marks weren't high enough or weren't?
Not high enough.
They weren't high enough.
Because, the guy had never met an exam he didn't ace, as he would say.
Okay.
And so he was like, it was astounding to me that he would have a son who couldn't ace an exam.
Now, your father's still alive.
Yes.
And he must be very proud of what you've achieved.
Not enough.
So you went to college in India, and then you decided to get graduate school in the United States. So where did you go?
I went to University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee for my computer. That's when I switched from electrical engineering to computer science.
But when you're in India, University of Wisconsin Milwaukee can't be that well known in India. So how did you happen to wind up there?
I'd never been to west of Bombay, quite frankly, and then I showed up in Milwaukee.